School of Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC-007 Business Communication for MBA program. Presenting Block 1 Introduction to Communication, Unit-3 Types of Communication, Part 1. In Part 1, we are going to discuss about introduction, verbal communication, types of verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Let's listen to Part 1.
Types of communication. In this unit, we will understand the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication, explain different types of verbal communication, understand the different types of non-verbal communication and their role in our life. Introduction. Robert Burton famously said that a blow with a word strikes deeper than a blow with a sword. Therefore, it is important to choose our words judiciously and cautiously, as it determines the success of our communication at personal and professional levels. Our personal and professional worlds move on the wheels of communication. A person with better communication skills achieves more success at personal and professional level as compared to a person who has average or below average level of these skills. Communication is essential in advising, counseling, guidance, mentoring, giving orders, delegation, giving warnings, preparing advertisement, and marketing, among others. A major part of our spoken words, that is oral communication, is supplemented by body language, gestures, signs, and expressions, and these are non-verbal components of communication. Rodney Overton believes that about 55% of the communicator's message is understood non-verbally. He also writes that only 7% of the message is understood through what is said, and 38% of the success of the communication depends on the way it is said. Verbal and non-verbal communication plays a vital role in general communication, mostly information communication in general life settings, and professional communication, mostly formal communication in workplaces, schools, etc. In this unit, we will go through the details of various types of communication to understand the difference between them and their importance. Verbal communication. Verbal communication is the sum total of the time spent in speaking, listening, and writing in a personal and professional capacity. In other words, we can understand verbal communication as the establishment of communication between people using oral or written words. The message is transferred from the sender to the receiver through an oral or written channel of communication. Verbal communication thus stands for both spoken and written communication. It can be one-way communication where the message flows from the sender to the receiver and nothing goes back to the sender from the receiver, or it can be a two-way communication where the communication is negotiated between two people, that is, the sender sends the message and the receiver responds. They exchange information, clarify doubts, and work together in harmony to achieve a common goal. Types of verbal communication. Basically, verbal communication can be classified into two categories, and they are: first, oral communication; second, written communication. Oral communication is something where we speak with someone through words whereas written communication includes the words which are in a written form. Let us now discuss these types of communication. Oral communication. This is the most common and popular mode of communication in our personal and professional life. Oral communication, as already explained, involves establishing communication through spoken words. It can be formal, informal, one-way or two-way communication. It can involve a face-to-face interaction, telephonic conversation, or communication through video conferencing. In other words, it involves a speaker and a listener. The speaker and the listener may establish a one-way or two-way communication depending on the setting. Oral communication can be of two types, that is, formal or informal. Informal oral communication involves persons speaking and listening to everyday occurrences like talking to friends, family members, or colleagues on topics not related to business or other formal situations. Informal oral communication is mostly casual in nature and is based on social relationships between people. It is unofficial in nature and normally occurs outside the hierarchy of school, college, and businesses. On the other hand, formal oral communication does not involve casual exchange of information and is governed by organizational hierarchies and chain of commands. The flow of information which flows is controlled by strict codes bound by time and structure put in place by the management team. Formal oral communication is practiced religiously in certain situations like interviews, oral evaluations or viva voce, lectures, debates, speeches, presentations, group discussions in a business meeting or in a school. It is a talk between the management team and the employees or school administration and staff members or students. It can be a situation where the information needs to be conveyed very quickly, for example, the announcement of the schedule, departure or arrival, or an aeroplane, train, bus, etc. Formal oral communication is more reliable since it is communicated in official capacity and in most cases can be traced back to its source. On the contrary, informal oral communication is not governed by such strict hierarchies and normally is not very reliable since most of it is said is in a casual setting. The information moves freely in informal settings as opposed to formal settings, where the information moves through predefined channels. Written communication. Let us now understand the second type of verbal communication, that is the written communication. Written communication can be understood as the sending of messages through written words. In this mode of communication, the sender of the message uses written mode to transfer the message. The message is communicated through letters, manuals, reports, emails, handbooks, books, circulars, etc. Written communication is a very effective way of communication since it involves documentation that can be preserved or can become a permanent record for future use. It is primarily a formal mode of communication and unlike oral communication, it is not very flexible in nature. A written document can be used as evidence in a legal scenario and hence it is a reliable mode of communication in professional settings. The language used in this form of communication is usually formal in nature. We use complete sentences, words, and avoid short forms or jargons. Written communication is also very popular in informal settings. In today's world of social media and multimedia messaging, we use written communication in our daily lives as well as in official communication in abundance. Social media messaging, SMS, and instant message has become an integral part of our lives. Formal or informal language is used in such a medium of communication depending on the relationship between the sender and the receiver of the message. It is important to note that regardless of the type of language used, the conversation or exchange of information in written form on these new mediums or platforms of communication can be documented and preserved for future personal, professional, legal, and other uses. Written communication has its own merits and demerits. In its formal sphere, written communication moves very slowly as compared to oral communication. Electronic or paper form of written communication is destined to a waiting period, and the receiver cannot access the message spontaneously as in the case of oral communication. At times, it can be unbearably slow, especially in the case of formal communication controlled by bureaucratic chains of command and management hierarchy. It also depends on the literacy of the person. On the other hand, oral communication does not require a person to be literate to transfer the message. Human beings are born with the ability to acquire language, and we start speaking much earlier than we learn to write. Written communication is a skill learnt in life, and a person needs to go through many years of training to become competent in this form of communication. A child learns to speak in a specific language just by imitating the elders around him or her. However, writing is taught. It is commonly agreed that human beings are born with language acquisition device and they acquire language in a social setting. So, it is very necessary for a person to become literate in order to participate in oral communication. It is a natural and faster process. On the other hand, written communication depends on the literacy of a person, and it is a slow form of communication. It is crucial to understand that we need to become proficient in using both forms of verbal communication in our personal and professional endeavors. Non-verbal communication. All forms of communication do not require the use of words in oral or written form. In this form of communication, the speaker generally does not exchange words. However, the communication takes place through non-verbal clues. It is an essential part of the communicative process, and various experts have opined that it constitutes more than 50% of the communicative process. Non-verbal communication may be visual or auditory in nature. Symbols, signs, gestures, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, physical appearance may be considered as visual non-verbal clues. A platoon of soldiers coordinating according to the beat of a drum by following a pattern of different lengths and notes in their parade is an example of auditory non-verbal communication. Another example could be a bell in a school, which is used in specific ways to govern the timetable of the school. Non-verbal communication governs a major aspect of our lives. We interact with signs and symbols on a daily basis. These conversations are normally one-way communication. For example, the traffic lights communicate with a very large group of commuters by guiding their movements for a swift flow of the traffic and controlling a probable situation of chaos. There are a number of symbols which are adequate for one-way communication. They indicate important information to us just through a simple picture, like a motorbike or telephone, to tell us important information we need in our day-to-day lives. Let us now look at the following signs and understand its meaning. The above sign tells the commuter that a U-turn is prohibited on a particular road. Such non-verbal signs and symbols replace words in sentences, thus removing literacy barriers between people and the essential traffic guidelines. Think about a situation where a person from an English-speaking country visits a non-English-speaking country with an international driving license. These symbols and signs will communicate with that person while he/she is driving a vehicle. There are different words for toilet for men and women. However, using standard symbols representing specific gender make it easier for the person who wants to use public washrooms or toilets. Non-verbal communication is a form of universal communication which is not restricted by language boundaries, and the same signs and symbols can be used everywhere. These signs and symbols act as a tool to include the illiterate population in all major activities. For example, every political party has a symbol, and an illiterate voter identifies the candidates through the symbol of the political party. It would be impossible to select the candidate of one's choice from a large pool of candidates contesting in a particular election. It takes care of two different perspectives. First, it helps the illiterate identify a candidate of their choice, and it makes the process faster. Second, a literate voter can just look at the symbols to identify his or her choice of the candidate to vote instead of reading the names, which will make the process slow. Now, think of a football or cricket match. These matches are attended by a large number of people, and it would be impossible to communicate with the audience and convey the match proceedings. A cricket umpire makes gestures through his or her hands to inform everyone if the player is out or has scored a boundary. A football referee uses colored cards, flags, and other gestures to communicate with the audience. These gestures and symbols are fixed and universally accepted. The people watching a football match can understand the proceedings of the match through these symbols, gestures, signs, regardless of their ethnicity or language they speak. These are simple one-way communication and do not require the use of language, speech, or written. Hence, non-verbal communication is important in our life, especially when the nature of the communication is one way and is directed for a large audience. In other scenarios where we need language, non-verbal communication complements the verbal communication.
You are listening to audiobook by School of Management Studies, IGNOU, for MBA program. Course code MMPC-007, Business Communication, Unit-3, Part-1. Course Coordinator, Professor Neeti Agrawal from School of Management Studies, IGNOU. Voiceover by Santosh Bharati. Edited by Tarannum Jahan. Program assisted by Jagbandhu Jana. And program produced by Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.